What if I told you that China's government is run by engineers and America's is run by lawyers? This one fact explains everything that's happening between these two countries right now. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Mehek. I hope you guys are all fine. And like always, I also hope that you guys are reading. Back with the book that I finished, China's Quest to Engineering the Future, Breakneck. It's by Dan Wang. Super impressed with this book. But first, let's talk about what the author is sharing in this book. The author is Dan Wang. Now this book is not a memoir, it's not a fiction. This book is actually a sharp on ground analysis by someone who's actually lived it. So Dan Wang lived in China for over a decade as a technology analyst, and right now he's a research fellow at Hoover Institute. Now he starts off this book by talking about that China is a country built by engineers. So a major chunk of its leadership in the government holds engineering degree. And what engineers do the best, they see a problem and build railways, bridges, roads, cities at a speed which almost sounds made up. So this is how he describes China. In contrast, he talks about US. He says that US is a country that is run by lawyers. And what do lawyers do? They do not build, they block paperwork, protection from risk, process. They slow things down. There is one statement in the book which kind of sums up this entire book. He says that China comes to a problem with a sledgehammer and America comes to it through gavel. Now, there are many instances in the book, incidences where he has explained these two different countries, but I have a list of some interesting facts that I wanted to share with you, which really stuck with me and I took back. The first one is obviously which you have been reading and hearing about in the news, that how by 2030 China is on track. Everything that the world manufactures, 45% of that output is going to come from China alone. Imagine one country amounting to almost half the manufacturing output of the world. The second was this moment in Shanghai during the lockdown where the author is talking about how the government had this megaphones installed over the drones and they kind of hovered over people, and the phones literally yelled at people to mask up. So through these examples, what the author is trying to say, that the same engineering mindset that is behind building bullet trains and railways or is also behind some really disturbing social impacts which he shares in the books, and that is something that Wang does not want you to look away from. So for every high-speed rail, there is a body count that he's sharing in this book. And that exactly is the contrast of this book. So towards the end, the author is not talking about, if America is better or China is better. He's saying, in fact, both the countries can really learn from each other. America can rediscover and start building things, whereas China can loosen its grip and, really allow for some individual freedom. Now, there's this one chapter, and I have the horrific facts here with me, which is on the one-child policy in China. And honestly, it is a chapter that will wreck you, because honestly, reading it was quite difficult. So we all know about the one-child policy, which lasted in China for 35 years. But I'm not sure if you're aware, I wasn't aware, that the author has shared in the book that by the end of 35 years, China had done 321 million abortions and 134 million sterilizations in total. He's sharing this one detail about a province called Shandong in 1991, where for 100 days, not a single child was allowed to be born. The government had its quota and had a policy that no births can happen. And every single pregnancy in that window had to be either aborted or forcefully sterilized. I mean, so many moms lost their lives, lost their kids. It was really heartbreaking to read that. And here's the part which kind of ties back to the whole book thesis that the author is arguing. He says that the policy was designed by the same mindset which, has given us bullet trains. So, instead of looking at population with having a social impact, they saw a population problem and treated it like a building material that needed to be shaped. They thought like a engineers and felt like this is something that needs to be shaped. And that's where the problem is, he said that the policy is linked to around 40 million. So he's also linking it that how this policy had wider disturbing social impact. By the end of it, there were 40, and till date, there's no account for it, 40 million missing women, because there was one child policy, everyone wanted a guy, 40 million women were missing. Either there were selective abortions, either the girl childs were sent for international adoption. And here's the saddening part. He says that by the time China came up with this policy, the population rate was already falling in China. It was from 6.0, it had fallen to 2.7. So they didn't even need this policy, and a huge amount of suffering was done for no reason at all. And he says that that is what happens when just to build mindset is applied to people instead of infrastructure. You need to see your people something more than infrastructure. They are not infrastructure, and that is what is the problem of China that he shares in this book. Now, what I love about the book is that it does not feel dry like a policy paper. In fact, there are personal anecdotes in the book. So one time the author could be talking about some data and giving you stats. Another moment he's talking about the bike ride during a province. So it has these personal stories which kind of makes this book interesting. I think the only problem with this book was that it did not explain in detail that how China came to be as an engineering country, and I think that would have been interesting to know about. So I feel this book is for you if you're someone who is interested in the US-China rivalry, geopolitics, and you want to sound smart about the US-China rivalry without shouting and making noise about it. Also, this is a fiction, I would say non-fiction, that actually moves. It doesn't feel dry like a textbook, it's more like a reportage. And I think that is what I loved about this book, because this is usually not my genre, and I absolutely enjoyed it. So that's all on this wonderful book, Breakneck. In fact, it's also called the business book of the year, I guess. I had read it somewhere. Yeah, the best recent book on China, America, and arguably the best book of the year. So, highly recommend this book. Let me know in the comments, are you team engineering country or lawyers country? But that's all on this book. I'm going to see you guys next week with another title. Till then, take care, bye bye, and please keep reading.